Hi, welcome to this video on the Kinked demand curve and the MR. Right now I only have the AR, but we will build up to understand the MR, and that's the slightly more difficult bit, so bear with me. I'm going to show you the detail to be able to understand that MR curve, not just draw it correctly. Okay, so some background information to the Kinked demand curve. This first section here is relatively elastic. This next section here is relatively inelastic, steeper. And the kink is here. So if I were to raise the price from P1 to P2, the theory is that the other oligopoly firms are going to keep their prices at P1, and therefore I'm going to lose quite a lot of customers. So my percentage change in my quantity is going to be a big drop, and that is why my revenue will fall. Initially my revenue would be my price times my quantity, which is P1 Q1, and now at P2 my revenue is now smaller. I have benefited in a small way that I'm charging a higher price, but I've lost so much quantity that overall my revenue falls. So I've got this down here that my revenue is now ABC, whereas before it was B, C, D, E. Right, so what if we go in the other direction? What if I lower the price and try to gain an advantage over my oligopolies competitors that way? Well, the theory is that they will also try and lower the price because they are fearful of losing customers. We call this a price war. And because everybody then starts selling at P3, then I don't really gain any customers off them. Maybe I start selling more quantity overall, a slightly higher increase in quantity because maybe the existing customers are buying slightly more. But there's no real gain from getting customers off the competition as they are the same price. My revenue used to be B, C, D, and E, and then now is P3 times Q3, which is C, E, and F. So using this table or using the diagram, we can see that revenue is going to fall whether if we increase price or whether we decrease price. Now we're going to use this insight to help us understand the MR. Okay, so MR is your change in your revenue as you sell extra units. In other words, let's go in this direction to the demand curve, through the demand curve. So as we are lowering price and we are increasing quantity, let's see what happens to revenue. So this is the bit that's kind of like the opposite way around as you would want to look at this, but we have to do it this way around to draw like a consistent curve. So kind of sorry about that. It's not the nicest way to do it, but if we go and lower price from P2 to P1, so we were in a situation where we were charging a higher price of P2 compared to our competitors who are keeping their price at P1, undercutting, then in that situation we are going from revenue ABC, a small amount of revenue, to a larger revenue of B, C, D, E. So in this situation we are lowering price, but our revenue actually increases. So that means that MR, being the change in revenue, is going to be a positive because revenue is increasing as we increase the quantity. We're increasing quantity from Q2 to Q1 in that scenario. So we would expect the MR to be a positive number going from P2 to P1. But what about when we go from P1 to P3? So in this case, our revenue goes from B, C, D, and E to C, E, and F. So our revenue, as discussed, is falling in this downward sloping demand curve direction. So as we decrease price further, our revenue actually falls because all the other firms charge the same price. So the change in our revenue, this is now a negative number, the first negative number so far. So our MR will also be a negative number. So what we can see from here is if you go beyond Q1 where you're dropping the price below P1, we are going to expect revenue to fall. And so we would expect the MR curve to be somewhere below the axis. It's going to be a negative MR. And then before Q1, it was a positive MR because the closer we dropped the price towards P1, the more revenue we could make. So MR before Q1 would be a positive MR. The other simple rule I guess you could use is your MR is always twice as steep. So if this is my demand curve at this angle of 20, then my MR curve should be roughly twice that here, and it's positive. Whoops, they shouldn't actually touch. They shouldn't touch at the beginning. That's my MR, and it's going to keep having this twice as steep gradient until I reach Q1. So my MR is still positive, still twice as steep, and then beyond Q1, there's going to be a jump where the MR is now going to be twice as steep as this next demand curve, which has angle 70. Oops, and will be negative, so it will be roughly kind of like this. And it keeps going because there's more units sold beyond there, but that goes off my screen. This is the MR, so there's a line here, a dashed line, because it's a discontinuity. There's a jump from one MR curve. Discontinuity from one MR to the next MR. So this shows revenue is increasing as you drop price all the way until you reach Q1 and P1. Then revenue starts to fall if you decrease the price beyond P1, such as to P3. So that's what this diagram shows. I'll talk in another video about like the MCs and that kind of stuff. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much.